We've all heard it before. Someone might say that a character is flat or one-dimensional, and we more or less understand what those concepts mean, but in practice, those terms can be a little difficult to apply, and they can seem a little vague and ethereal.
Fairy dust, it doesn't exist.
To say that we need three-dimensional characters is all well and good. That's great. That's what everyone wants in their stories. However, there is one small problem with that, and that is, what the hell is a three-dimensional character? Do we actually know what it is? Can we define it? Hello everyone, my name is Eduardo, you can call me Ed, I'm a freelance book editor, and today we're going to tackle the topic of three-dimensional characters, because it's a deceptively difficult topic to grasp, and I think I can make it a little easier to understand. So let's get into it. Intuitively, we know that a three-dimensional character is someone that's complex and very deep. That's technically correct. But those concepts are a little too vague and too broad, and it's difficult to draw any particular practical application from them. At the end of the day, those concepts don't give us enough of a roadmap about what we need to write in our stories. So let's get more specific. What is a three-dimensional character? And I mean specifically, what's the definition of it? And this all comes from a playwright whose name I cannot even pronounce, so I'm not going to try. And this gentleman proposed the idea that to write a complex character, we need to consider three aspects: physiology, psychology, and sociology. Those are the three dimensions of character. That being said, those concepts can still feel a little too broad and too vague and not enough. And not only that, I would argue that nowadays those concepts as a measurement of three-dimensional characters and complexity, they are a little obsolete. Now, bear with me. Today, we have so many resources about writing, so many books, so many videos, so many articles out there teaching people how to write, that people already think about this stuff. They think about the physiology and the sociology and the psychology of the characters, sometimes even in smaller characters. So does that mean that everyone is writing three-dimensional characters and every character is complex because people think about this stuff all the time? That doesn't sound right. I'm going to give you a few layers, a few steps that are hopefully easier to apply to your stories, and they will also give you a more informed notion of what a complex character is and how to develop a complex character. And so the first layer is, of course, the external layer of a character. This is all about the external traits of our characters, not only physically, but in general. How do the characters present themselves to the world? This includes the physical appearances of our characters, their habits, their hobbies, their basic opinions. It's about how they project themselves, how they want the world to see them. And this is natural, right? Because that's exactly what happens in the real world when we meet someone. We get to see their physical appearances, we might learn about their opinions, about their jobs, maybe, and the things that build up their everyday life. This is the first dimension of a character. It's all about what we can immediately perceive about someone. It's about how that person wants to be perceived. And keep in mind, this can be a conscious or unconscious decision on their part. Take Walter White, for example. At the start of Breaking Bad, we have this very soft man with that horrible, horrible mustache that looks more like a stain. He comes across as a very insecure person, and even when you do see a spark of life in his eyes, it doesn't last long. This shows a very defeated man who seems to be pushed around and disrespected by the people around him. That's how he presents himself to the world. But of course, we know that's not the whole story. If the first dimension of a character is the what, then the second dimension is the why. Why are these characters the way they are? And this is where probably we're going to spend a lot of time developing our characters, because we need a clear understanding of why those people are the way they are, even if they don't understand it themselves. Here is where we start to explore things like upbringing, past relationships, medical history, traumas, and we do all this to explain what we saw in the first dimension of the character. In the case of Walter White, we see that he is deeply unhappy with his own life. He probably thought that he had this successful future ahead of him, and he thinks that his friends stole that from him. So Walter White feels trapped, really. He feels overqualified in a job that doesn't really value him. And that's how we get the resentful man that we get at the beginning of Breaking Bad. And this encompasses psychological elements such as Walt's ego, but it also includes sociological elements such as Walter's education and the way he handles relationships with other people. Now, we might think that's enough to craft a compelling and complex character. We have the face value, which is the external side, and we have the deep within side that explain why the character is the way he is. That's enough, right? No, 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 no. Sadly, that's not enough. If you've done this character work, that's great. That's fantastic. It's a really good foundation for what comes next. However, it's not the whole story. Many people struggle writing interesting characters because they do all this job about the face value and the internal side of the character, and that's great. But then they stop. They think that's all they need in order to write a complex character, and that's not the case. So, what are we missing? The third dimension is about who those people really are. It's about who those characters are under pressure or under scrutiny. Think of it this way. In the real world, we all want to be good people, right? Well, most of us. But we all have a defined set of values and morals, and we all want to believe that we are good people. In a way, we all want to be the hero. But when the chips are down, when something is difficult, or when something requires a sacrifice, how many of us will actually do it? How many of us will help an old lady cross the street? How many will help someone that's being robbed? How many of us will take in a friend that lost a house? And how many will stand up to a corrupt government? Unfortunately, the answer is not many, and that's the point. We are not the people we think we are deep down, and our true selves will only come out in the face of a conflict. And the same is true to our characters. Whatever morals and values they have, whatever outward appearances they want to present to the world, it all needs to be challenged by some conflict that reveals who they really are in their hearts. In Breaking Bad, the way Walter White is put against the wall is with the cancer diagnosis. He's going to die and he's leaving nothing behind to his family. He's failed completely to live up to his own potential. So he snaps, and he begins this life of crime and poking meth because he was under so much pressure that this facade he was putting on start to break apart, and we get to see what Walter White really is under the hood. And those are the three dimensions of character. And that's the end of the video. I hope you find it useful, and I hope you... What? What did you say? What? I missed something. Yes, it's true. We are missing something quite important. If you paid attention to my Breaking Bad examples, and if you've seen the show, you probably realize something very strange. Everything I talked about was from episode 1, but Breaking Bad has 62 episodes. So what's up with that? Does that mean that Walter White is a three-dimensional character from the very beginning of the story? But that's strange too. Isn't a complex character or a three-dimensional character something that you need to build up towards? Is it something that you can achieve in just one episode? No, that's usually not possible. So how does this work? And here's the key thing to understand. If you take anything away from this video, anything, let it be this. When we talk about three-dimensional characters and character development in general, we are not referring to an outline or a time frame like we do when we talk about story structure, for example. Three dimensions of character is not a beginning, middle, and end. It's a cycle. It's a cycle that feeds itself. Three-dimensional characters will face a conflict that will force them to learn something new about themselves, and this will trigger a change. This change will then alter the character's default personality and maybe even their appearances, and this will become their new surface level, their new dimension 1. The backstory will be everything that the character has already lived, plus what happened during the conflict that forced that character to change. That now becomes their new dimension 2. And that opens the door for more conflict, where more changes can take place, and so on. This can happen multiple times before the story ends, and you might argue that it should happen many times before the story ends. This happens in Breaking Bad over and over and over and over and over again. And no wonder we praise the show so much, because it's a masterclass of making these small changes and perpetuating the cycle that keeps Walter White's development believable. So please keep this in mind. Character development is not a linear thing, it's a cycle. And you need to find ways to keep pushing that cycle and perpetuating it in some way to make it interesting. So, in a nutshell, those are the three dimensions that we're going to use: the outward presence, both physical and psychological, of our characters, the backstory and everything internal that explains why the character is that way on the outside, and finally, who the character really is under pressure and what decisions the character will make when the world tries to break them. One last thing that I will mention is that I quite like this way of looking at character development because it's quite flexible. Since it's a cycle that will eventually loop around, you don't necessarily have to start in the first dimension and reach the third. You can start in the third if the conflict is more interesting to you and you want to develop that side of the story a bit more. So that kind of freedom is really appealing to me. And I think personally that it's easier to apply when we start to plan a story. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Making videos is still pretty difficult for me and it takes a lot of effort. So I'm quite appreciative of anyone who watches all the way to the end. And if you want to leave me a like or a comment or anything like that, I'd be extremely thankful. If you found this useful and you want to see more, please look around here. I'll leave a link to my story structure video, which is a nice companion to this one. I think they complement each other really well. Hopefully I'll be back here with more videos soon. But for now, that's it. Bye. See ya.